Story is titled, My Boyfriend Says He's Not Ready for Marriage, but wants me to wait while he sorts out his life. I'm 34 and running out of time to have kids. Should I leave him or stay hopeful? The clock on the wall ticked louder than it ever had before, or maybe it was just my own anxiety amplifying the sound. My name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old, and I live in a cozy one-bedroom apartment in Portland with my boyfriend, Ethan. We've been together for 7 years. 7 years of shared laughter, challenges, and dreams. Or so I thought. I met Ethan when I was 27, still fresh from the sting of a breakup and not exactly looking for anything serious. But then he came along, with his easy smile and the kind of charm that made you forget your worries. He wasn't just my boyfriend. He became my best friend, my partner, the man I thought I'd build a life with. For years, I believed we were on the same page. We talked about the future, about marriage, and kids. At least, I thought we were talking about them. Looking back now, I realized those conversations were always vague. Ethan would say things like, someday, or when the time is right. I wanted to believe him, so I did. But now, at 34, someday feels like a cruel joke. It started a few weeks ago during a casual Sunday morning breakfast. We were sitting across from each other at the little dining table we bought together last year, sunlight streaming through the windows. I had been thinking about the future a lot lately, about how much I wanted to get married and start a family. So I decided to bring it up, gently, of course. Ethan, I said, setting my coffee mug down. Have you thought more about when we might get married? He looked up from his plate, startled, like I had just asked him to solve a complex math equation. I don't know, Sarah. I guess I haven't really thought about it lately. His response stung more than I cared to admit. How could he not have thought about it? After 7 years, wasn't it natural to think about the next step? Well, I pressed, keeping my tone light, I just feel like we've been together long enough to start planning for the future. Don't you? Ethan sighed and pushed his plate away, leaning back in his chair. Sarah, I love you. You know that. But I'm just not ready for marriage yet. There's a lot I need to figure out first. The room felt colder suddenly, despite the sunlight. My mind raced. Not ready yet. What did that even mean? Ethan, I said, trying to keep the tremor out of my voice. We've been together for 7 years. How much longer do you need to figure things out? He hesitated, avoiding my gaze. It's not about us, he said finally. It's about me. My career isn't where I want it to be, and I don't feel stable enough to take that step yet. I wanted to scream. Ethan had always been ambitious, always striving for the next promotion or the next big project, but his career had never seemed unstable to me. He had a good job, we had a comfortable life. What more did he need? So, what are you saying? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I'm saying I need more time, he said, his tone apologetic. I don't want to rush into something as serious as marriage until I'm absolutely sure I'm ready. That conversation haunted me for days. I couldn't shake the feeling that Ethan's hesitation wasn't about his career or his readiness. It was about me. If he truly loved me, if he truly wanted a future with me, wouldn't he be ready by now? I confided in my best friend, Emily, hoping for some clarity. Emily had been married for over a decade and had 2 kids of her own. She listened patiently as I poured out my heart, her expression a mix of sympathy and frustration. Sarah, she said, placing a hand on mine, you need to ask yourself a hard question. Are you willing to wait for him, even if it means giving up what you want? Her words hit me like a ton of bricks. I had always thought of myself as patient, as someone who could compromise for the sake of love, but now I wasn't so sure. A few nights later, Ethan and I sat on the couch, the tension between us palpable. I decided to ask him directly. Ethan, I said, my voice steady despite the lump in my throat. Do you see a future with me? Marriage? Kids? All of it? He looked at me, his expression unreadable. Of course I do, Sarah. I love you. I can't imagine my life without you. Then why do you keep putting it off? I asked, the frustration finally bubbling to the surface. Do you realize how much this is hurting me? I'm 34, Ethan. I don't have forever to wait. I know, he said, his voice barely audible. I know it's not fair to you, but I don't want to get married just because we're on a timeline. I want it to be right. His words cut deep. I understood where he was coming from, but I couldn't ignore my own feelings. I wanted a partner who was all in, who didn't need years of figuring things out to know they wanted to be with me. The days that followed were some of the hardest of my life. Ethan and I avoided the topic, but the tension lingered. Every time I looked at him, I felt a mix of love and resentment. And then one day, I found myself standing in front of a jewelry store. Inside, a young couple was picking out an engagement ring, their faces glowing with excitement. I watched them for a moment, a lump forming in my throat. That was the future I had always dreamed of, but now it felt further away than ever. The weeks after that conversation passed like a slow, painful blur. Ethan and I tried to move forward, but the elephant in the room was impossible to ignore. Every time I saw a wedding announcement on social media or overheard a mother talking about her kids at the coffee shop, it felt like a reminder of everything I wanted but couldn't seem to have. One evening, Ethan came home from work and found me sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. I had been doing that a lot lately, sitting in silence, lost in my thoughts. "Sarah," he said softly, sitting down beside me, "we need to talk." My heart sank. I had heard those words enough times to know they rarely led to anything good. "What is it?" I asked, bracing myself. He took a deep breath. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said, about marriage and kids, and I realized something. I don't know if I'll ever feel ready." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. "What are you saying?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "I'm saying that I love you, but I don't want to keep holding you back," he said, his eyes filled with guilt. "You deserve someone who can give you everything you want, and I'm not sure I can be that person." I stared at him, unable to process what he was saying. For years, I had imagined our future together. I had pictured the wedding, the house, the kids, and now he was telling me it might never happen. "So that's it?" I said, my voice rising. "You're just giving up? Throwing away 7 years like it doesn't mean anything?" "It's not like that," he said, his voice breaking. "I don't want to lose you, Sarah, but I also don't want to make promises I can't keep." Tears streamed down my face as I tried to make sense of it all. "Do you even love me?" I asked, the question tearing at my heart. "Of course I do," he said, reaching for my hand. "I love you more than anything, but love isn't enough if we're not on the same page about the future." That night, I cried myself to sleep. For years, I had believed that Ethan and I were building a life together. Now, I felt like that life was crumbling beneath my feet. The next morning, I called Emily. She came over immediately, bringing coffee and a shoulder to cry on. "You have to think about what's best for you," she said gently. "You've spent so much time putting Ethan's needs first. Maybe it's time to focus on what you want." Her words stayed with me long after she left. For years, I had told myself that love was about compromise, about patience, but now I wasn't so sure. Was it really love if one person was constantly waiting, constantly sacrificing? A week later, Ethan and I sat down to have one final conversation. I had been dreading it, but I knew it was necessary. "Ethan," I said, my voice steady despite the pain in my chest, "I can't keep waiting for you to figure out what you want. I need someone who's ready to build a future with me now, not someday." He looked at me, his eyes filled with regret. "I understand," he said quietly. "I don't want to hold you back, Sarah. You deserve to be happy." It was the hardest decision I had ever made, but in that moment, I knew it was the right one. I packed my things and moved out of our apartment the next day. As I drove away, I felt a mix of heartbreak and relief. In the weeks that followed, I started to rebuild my life. I threw myself into work, reconnected with old friends, and even started therapy to help process everything I had been through. It wasn't easy. There were nights when I cried myself to sleep, wondering if I had made a mistake. But slowly, I began to see a future for myself that didn't revolve around waiting for someone else. And then, one day, something unexpected happened. I was at a bookstore, browsing the shelves, when I struck up a conversation with a man named Daniel. He was kind, funny, and shared my love of literature. We exchanged numbers, and a few weeks later, we went on our first date. Daniel wasn't like Ethan. He didn't hesitate or make excuses. From the beginning, he was clear about what he wanted: a partner, a family, a future. It's been 2 years since I ended things with Ethan, and my life has changed in ways I never could have imagined. I'm engaged to Daniel now, and we're planning our wedding for next spring. Looking back, I don't regret my time with Ethan. He taught me a lot about love, patience, and the importance of being honest with yourself about what you want. But more than anything, he taught me that sometimes the hardest decisions are the ones that lead to the greatest happiness. If this story resonated with you, please like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you for listening.